Hello there, Alyssa.
Hello there, Brian.
All right, so we had a great show today, I thought, despite Whoopi not being here. We had Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett on the show today. She's a rising star in the Democratic Party for sure. You asked her about if Democrats are doing enough to push back against Republicans in her point of view.
Yeah.
What did you think of her answer?
Well, and I then followed up because she I think she is the sort of next generation voice that's made a name for herself with these like punchy comebacks and quips. And in this environment, I think you have to be able to do that. Like Trump is so good at sort of landing a, figurative punch on the people that he opposes. Democrats have kind of struggled to have the person who can really clap back, and she's somebody who can do that. But I think she agreed that Dems need to be more aggressive and use more sort of this era of tactics, not like it's an old playbook from the 90s.
This goes back to what you've been saying all week, which is
that and weird. And she's very young. I actually had to Google her age because she looks very young. She's 43, and I think there's something generational with this where it's like, I don't like the playing in the mud, but to some degree, you have to meet people where they are to even get traction in this environment. But I followed up and asked her if Democrats would be willing to shut down the government if to push back on Trump. And she essentially said yes. She did, to give her credit, say, well, it wouldn't be us, it'd be Republicans, because a bill would need, any funding bill usually needs some Democratic votes to pass. And there's a world in which I think that could be the strongest hand that Democrats could play. So I'll be curious to see, because that's pretty newsy if we're just maybe, a month or so away from a government shutdown.
Absolutely. One major story we didn't get a chance to talk about today was the Trump administration kind of shifting America's stance on Ukraine and what's going on there, on the war. They've made a really drastic shift from where we were a couple of months ago, and U.S. foreign policy is now seeming to align with Russian President Vladimir Putin. This is very different where the Republicans would normally be in this world. I know that Ukraine is something very important to you. How significant is this?
It's incredibly significant. And when I talked ahead of the election about the reasons I couldn't be for Donald Trump, his position on Ukraine was one of the biggest reasons I just couldn't support him this time. He has a profound lack of moral clarity when it comes to the war between Russia and Ukraine. And it strikes me because he is somebody who does understand America's sovereignty and he understands our need for borders, yet can't then appreciate for some reason that Ukraine's sovereign borders were violated, were stolen, and that they were attacked viciously by the Kremlin at no fault of their own. He even seemed to allude to the fact that like Ukraine could have prevented this and Ukraine could have stopped the war. I'm very nervous. Like, to put it in some historic context, basically every modern president has tried to have some sort of Russia reset. Obama had the famous reset. Biden, to some degree, was like, we're going to give Ukraine certain aid but withhold other aid. But there's always been this acknowledgement that Russia is a bad actor that, yes, you have to talk to. Yes, you have to have some diplomacy. But this notion that they're going to be an honest broker and do what's like right for the world and like for humanity is just not reality. And I don't have a problem with dialogue. I have a major problem with excluding the Ukrainians from it and with essentially conceding everything up front, because it's hard to understand. Russia doesn't need to negotiate anymore. They know that all of the preconditions America should have put on the table. Could Ukraine potentially join NATO in the future? Would Ukraine potentially require that they give back some of their land that was taken in 2014, and then the Donbas in this most recent conflict? And Pete Hegseth came right out and basically said those things are off the table. Like, Russia's gonna keep the land they got, and Ukraine won't join NATO. So they don't have a hand to negotiate with. I'm very worried about it because it's not just Ukraine. It's Poland. And when it's Poland, it's our 20,000 U.S. forces there. It's our allies in Europe. It's a very concerning moment that people should be paying attention to. And I just hope that there are people around Donald Trump, because I know there are some in the administration who think this is very reckless and who think he needs to have more moral clarity about who we should be aligning ourselves with. And I hope that they're communicating that to him.
Well, I mean, when President Trump is talking about basically annexing Canada and things like that, I mean, he has a different view on this sort of thing. Jasmine Crockett said this, which is something I've said quite a bit, is a second Trump term is fundamentally different than the first. If you're approaching it like it's basically going to be a repeat of the last one, except hopefully no pandemic kind of thing, that's not it. He feels really emboldened. He's okay shaking up basically the world order as we know it. And he's serious to some degree when he says stuff like that. And he's had this approach of thinking that bullying our allies
works. I disagree with it. I think America's greatest strength is that we have friends. Like China doesn't have friends. China buys friends, but we have countries who will show up for us like they did after 9/11, like they always have when we've needed them. And I don't think it's smart in the long term to show that we're not just unreliable allies, but like we're going to bully our closest friends.
I mean, the President Trump's relationship with Putin has always been, fascinating and an object of a lot of conjecture. Yeah. And you were in the White House in that first term. Did Putin get brought up around you with the president? Is that something you had any insight into the way he referred to him? Did he seem like a friend or a nemesis, or how did he treat it?
So when I was with Pence has always consistently in his career been very clear-eyed about Putin.
You met Vladimir Putin.
I actually met him once when Pence confronted him at the ASEAN summit and directly called him out for attempting to interfere in our elections.
I remember that moment.
And there was not... There was no goodwill there. And I've said before, that is one of the few people I've looked in their eyes and you see pure evil. Like this is not a redeemable figure in history, in my opinion. And Pence had that understanding. At DOD, I felt like we had that understanding. Trump I don't want to like diagnose it, but I think that he really is drawn to strong men. I think that he thinks that leaders should be more like kings, less like elected presidents who are responsive to Congress and the courts. And I think that he respects that Putin is powerful and that he rules with an iron fist. I wish he would better acquaint himself with his human rights record, with, exactly what he's done, the horrors that he's done throughout Ukraine, because I think any thinking person would be on the side of Ukraine.
But do you think that he's not aware of those things, or do you think he's got tacit awareness of it? Or
I think he has some awareness of it. I think he gets a lot of really wrong information. We know Russia is they're on our social media, they're on our Facebook feeds, our Twitter feeds, and you can stumble easily upon Russian propaganda that's misleading about the war in Ukraine. There is this one that's infamous. It's been shared millions and millions of times, claiming that Zelensky owns a property in Vero Beach, Florida, that's like $20 million, which is where I got married. It's not true. Mm-hmm. A simple Google search can see this is a fabricated fake lie. But I do think that he's been misled by the Tucker Carlsons of the world and others to believe that we're sending him a blank check, Zelensky's putting it in his pockets, and he's just profiting off of this. We are literally sending them weaponry that we produce here that's good for our economy so that they can fight our enemy on the other side of the world. Like, it's the most, like, it's a very basic American thing that we should be doing. And I think there are some folks around him who give him bad information.
All right, let's switch gears a little bit here. We had yesterday on the show star Hollywood producer Will Packer with us. Yes. He was a great guest, I thought. He was
a great guest.
And he was talking about the art of the pivot. Mm-hmm. And this is when it came to his career. He was talking about it. And it made me think of you a little bit because few people have made a bigger pivot than you from the White House to a talk show host. Yeah. When you left the White House, you almost had to start from scratch. Tell me about that.
I think that you learn more from failure than success. Yeah. And when Trump lost, I resigned from my post in the White House. I had nothing lined up. I had an idea that I was going to start like a consulting practice and do just kind of like PR consulting. Got a couple of clients. And let me tell you, this was the most humbling experience of my life. You go from being the top spokesperson in the country, walking into the White House every day, feeling powerful. When you meet world leaders, they greet you as the honorable. And I was like really like begging for work from like third tier like attorneys general candidates in Virginia in like a random cyber business out in Colorado. But I'm somebody who's always had to work to be able to pay my bills. Right. And, it wasn't an option to sit it out and see how things go. But the humbling part of it was important to me, but also the having to like get out there and find work and to not have too much pride to be like, you know what, sure, I might have had this fancy title, but things did not go the way I thought they would. And I now need to like pull myself up and go pave my next, path ahead. And then I think a lot of folks kind of think like I left and then voila, I was on TV and got like these big deals. It wasn't at all. It was about a year that I was struggling and I was doing the work that I could find, and I felt very rudderless. I didn't feel passionate about what I was doing, but I was at least happy that like I was picking myself up and just moving forward, like one foot in front of the other. And I still did a little bit of TV as I was asked, wasn't paid to. And honestly, it was mostly because I wanted to get on CNN or wherever so that I could get more clients, so that I could make more money.
Right. So even at that point, you weren't thinking of yourself as a TV host.
It wasn't like, I've got to get a TV job. But CNN eventually came to me. It was about almost exactly a year after I resigned. It was December of 2021. And I got my first TV contract. And I was really happy. I was very I felt honestly humbled being at CNN, because there were a lot of journalists I had fought with when I was at the White House. There were a lot of people that I felt like I'm going to listen, I'm going to pull from the expertise I have, but this is not the world I ever expected to be in. I never saw myself being on TV. And then enter The View, which was the biggest wild card ever. And I never thought I'd be good at it. And to be honest, I wasn't really at first. A little spokesperson-y, a little on talking points.
Do you watch back to the beginning ever?
I do, but honestly, it gives me such anxiety to watch old clips of myself.
I have a distinct memory when I was excited about trying you out. I thought you were going to do great, and you checked a lot of boxes, and our conversations off camera were great. I will say you didn't click right away.
Yeah.
And I might have brought you back a couple extra times when there wasn't evidence that it was going to work. Right. And then it did.
No, and I'll say, you and Robin really believed in me, because you both, and you gave me good advice. And you didn't need to. I wasn't an employee then. I was a random girl guest hosting. And it was, you said, don't be a spokesperson, don't talk like a government official, and show your personality. Because I think also that at the time that it was, an audience like ours could absolutely reject somebody because they worked for Trump, and then it's you're complicit, we're elevating her, or whatever. But you understood that if people got
at least that's gone away.
It'll never go away. But I do feel and I believe this genuinely, as audience members got to know me as a multifaceted person,
right,
there was more acceptance. They might be I will never agree with that you worked for him, and that's fine.
The best advice I've ever been able to give any host, and even ones that have been here a long time, is to show more of what we see backstage on the air. And that's really it, just to be as authentic as possible. And you're fun to chat with backstage. And so the more of that you show, more of yourself that you
try
show,
to be normal, just
the better
try.
It is. Yeah. And it's been a successful pivot. You've done a great job.
And if I could just say on this, I always knew I had actually wanted to be a journalist, and then it was in college that I realized I was a little more partisan, and I liked political activism, but I knew I wanted to be in the space of current events and where decisions are made. And so it was kind of full circle. It was hard leaving government, which I was passionate about, because I felt you could affect change, and you could move things quicker than you maybe could on the outside. I've come to really love this role because we do have a huge platform. It might be totally different work, but if there's something I care about, we were literally just talking about Ukraine, I have a platform to do that from. So it's different, but it's related, and it still fulfills the passions that I have.
What's the hardest part of this job, in your opinion?
The outside scrutiny.
Yeah.
I can, even on the worst day, I can always handle the women at the table because I know them, and there's enough goodwill that even when there's a blow up, we're gonna be fine. Mm-hmm. It is hard when people who will never know you are just cruel. And you've been helpful to me. Whoopi has don't read it. But it's hard not to.
Yeah.
And it's also natural too, because sometimes I want to also just to get feedback of what could I be doing better? What maybe isn't connecting that I'm saying. But that's the hardest part. And first in my seat, I tick off the right because I'm not pro-Trump enough, and I tick off the left because they think I'm pro-Trump, even though I'm vocally anti-Trump. I'm just not anti-Republican.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a tough thing. You're navigating it as well as anyone can, I think.
Thank you.
All right. Let's talk about Bravo. Let's make you happy.
Oh, right. Yeah.
In the Bravo world, the big story seems to be all about, and I'm saying this definitively, I'm very deep in the Bravo world, it's all about Craig and Paige.
Yes.
Who broke up. Now, what's interesting about this relationship is it's Paige who wants to wait to have kids and get married so that she can build her career. Craig was ready now, and it seems to be a major reason why they broke up. Was it refreshing to see Paige hold her ground in this way?
100%. So I respectfully could have seen this coming from miles away, and not because they weren't in love and a good couple. But Paige is younger than him. She's 5 years younger. She's, I think, 30 or 31. She's crushing it. She's got the Giggly Squad podcast. She's doing Today Show interviews around fashion. She's traveling all over, doing all these different things. And her star is really rising. And she's in New York City. And I can relate to being that age where you want to grab all the work that you can and you want to build what you're trying to. And he's older, and he's 36 or 37, lives in South Carolina, and kind of wants to be a male Martha Stewart. Mm-hmm. Those worlds are a little tough to align. They can. I think with love, you can make it work. But I always say, with me and Justin, we were long distance early on, and it was good for our relationship and very healthy. It made us be deliberate and intentional about time spent. But there was always a light at the end of the tunnel. You can't do the indefinite. Will we ever be in the same place? Will we ever want the same things at the same time? We always knew, we're eventually going to get back to DC together. We're eventually going to want to get engaged and be married and have roughly the same timeline. So I think timing is huge, But the X factor in this is that it's the woman standing up for what she wants rather than sort of like the trope or the more common idea of like, she wants to get married, she wants to have babies right now. She's been like very blunt and direct with him, and she got a lot of criticism for it. And I really respect her that she's like, this is who I am, this is what I want. I may want all those things, but not right now. And it would honestly be worse to like lie to a partner and pretend you want them and like force it. That's always a recipe for disaster. So very fascinating stuff. But
it's important to be on the same page. I think that's really what the takeaway is. And especially when you're young, you don't usually think things through in that way. You're having fun, you're enjoying each other, and maybe you're not really making the lists, and you don't want to like.
It doesn't seem sexy, but it really matters. Like wanting the same things around the same time is extremely important.
Yeah. I mean, I often, I've been married over 20 years, and I actually kind of remark occasionally like, man, we got lucky. Like we synced up on all the important stuff, but we only dated for a year before we got engaged, and then only were engaged for less than a year. So, I mean, and then, it worked out. But man, you roll the dice a little bit.
My husband the other day joked that he's like, I bought low and I could sell high because I was like unemployed when we got engaged. I was like, help, I need work. And he's like, and now you're doing so well. But I kind of love that like we literally got engaged and we're planning a wedding at what was in some ways the lowest point in my life, like career-wise and professionally, and like trying to find my footing. But like he stepped in so much to be like, I'm gonna help you find yourself. You're gonna get through this. He didn't love me any less. He wasn't worried about my happiness and ability to get it together down the road. But
I was the same thing. I was unemployed, got engaged. I mean, I was a little bored, I guess. I wanted to like produce something, so I produced a big proposal. But and it worked
always
out.
The producer.
Yeah, but it all worked out. But I mean, in retrospect now, as a dad of daughters that are getting closer slowly towards dating age and things like that, first of all, I'm like, well, my wife was too young, and my daughters better not marry some unemployed guy. I mean, what's going on? So I don't know. I'm very concerned about all this.
Amazing.
All right, before we go, we have a listener text for you. This is from Grace in New York. Hey, Alyssa, I know you've said recently that you've made friends with your neighbors. My question is, what is your best advice for making friends in your 30s? It used to be easier in my early 20s. Thanks, and I love you on the show.
Oh, thank you. I love this question because we did it briefly on the weekend show. And I did not feel seen by the table. Everyone was like, I have so many friends. Everyone wants to be my friend. Like that was, especially Sunny, but that was like basically the take. And I relate to this completely. In my 20s, it was easy. And I think because it was more of a going out culture, it was like, we're just going to go to the bars, and like you met a girl at one thing one weekend, you're like, oh, tag along with all of us. There's a sort of social dynamic that just makes it more natural to have new friendships and to meet people. Mm-hmm. In your 30s, you're kind of like more focused on your career. You're probably going out less. You may be married, and like it's a lot harder. My husband can talk to anyone. He hits it off with everyone. He's already got all these friends in our new neighborhood. And I got lucky because I have a very kind woman on my street who basically just like made all the effort on the front end. I have a really hard time like getting to know new people, and colleagues I think is probably the most natural because it's like sort of forced that you spend time together. Like I think of friends in adulthood, I'm like a lot of people like here at the show. And like I left all my friends in DC when I moved here. So I've like honestly could have felt at times very lonely in New York, and it's been so nice that I've like met neighbors and really like them, and we're in semi-similar places in life. And even that, like having just bonding over, like we live in the same community. That's a thing you can bond over. We can complain about this traffic light. We can talk about how great this is. We all love our mayor. She's like awesome. So I think it's like meet people where you are, and like don't be hard on yourself if it doesn't come naturally, because it really doesn't to me. I'm more introverted, and I tend to do better with friends who like at least show that they make the effort, and then I feel comfortable making the effort back.
Absolutely. And then you'll find like, when you have kids, it's another part of that where, you have your kids' friends, parents, and there's groups like that and stuff. But my wife has so many friends from that world. Yeah. And then I am lucky enough that most of the husbands are cool and nice. And so we go out and it's great. But she makes all the effort for that.
That's a whole thing too, is like, if you like the friends that your spouse does. Luckily, so far, I've liked all of my husband's new friends' spouses, but like that can be.
I have a theory that in most relationships, there's always one dud. Yeah. I mean, generally, so it's rare. So you
have to accept it.
But if you find like a wife and a husband.
I hate that because then I'm definitely the dud with me and Justin. Justin's
I didn't want to say.
Fun.
No, I'm just kidding. No, but I find that like if you can find like a couple where you love both of them, hang on with both hands, lock them down.
But to be honest, that's how Justin and I feel about Sarah and Max. We're like, wait,
they're
like
great. They're a great
them.
hang. Absolutely.
Yeah, and
Manny
they're
and Sunny
different than
too
each
are
other.
actually really good.
That's true.
Yeah. And Joy and Steve. Actually, I don't know what it is about this place.
I like Steve a lot. I've never spent time with him.
Yeah, he's fun. He's fun. All right. Well, he's got a lot of opinions. So.
Yes.
All right. On that note, thank you for joining me today, Alyssa. Tomorrow I'll be here with Anna Navarro, and we will see you then.